What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And hello, our America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, January 19th, 2017. And yes, I still have a little bit of a rocky voice here. It's getting better day by day. And it's just going to take a little while for me to be back to my normal self here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And it's Thursday, January 19th, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday, all the more so because we are less than 24 hours away from Donald Trump taking the oath of office as the 45th President of the United States of America. He flew from New York to Washington, D.C. earlier today and has already started all of the ceremonies involved with the inauguration, the laying of the wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington. They just got done doing that. So there's a whole lot of activity that's going on over and above the oath of office itself. So we're almost there. We're almost there. And we are hearing that President-elect Trump has already set up 200 executive orders for his signature in the first few days in office, most of them basically unwinding all this nonsense from 8 years of Barack Obama. And we're actually getting this from Judge Andrew Napolitano, who's apparently having a lot of discussions with Donald Trump. And one of the other things Napolitano has revealed is that Donald Trump is specifically looking for a Supreme Court justice along the same lines of Antonin Scalia. And that is really going to upset a lot of the liberal crybabies and whiners who are out there. And they're just thrashing around like crazy. Now, Newt Gingrich has taken umbrage with all of these Democrats who are boycotting the inauguration. It is considered poor form. And says they're not scoring any points with the public. Nobody's agreeing with them about this. They're making themselves look small and silly. There's apparently 65 of them now. And here is where the Democrats and the liberals in general fail to understand the public mood. They are damaging themselves irreparably in the eyes of the public. They're going to be decades recovering from this amazing display of childish behavior during this election. And I don't think that they're stopping to realize that over the long term, they're causing a lot of damage to no immediate gain whatsoever. Now, as you know, there's been a lot of talk about these plans to disrupt the inauguration, mostly focusing around this group, Disrupt J20. And there was a lot of concern, talk about hired disruptors, chaining the trains, bottles of butyric acid and everything. And apparently somebody blinked, okay, because now all of a sudden the corporate media is saying it was all really just a big hoax. Nothing's going to happen. It's just a big hoax. I think they were really thinking about doing a disruption, trying to trigger a color revolution, and they came to the conclusion they couldn't pull it off, because that's what everybody's expecting them to do. And so they pulled the plug on that, and now they're trying to back away from it, saying, it was all just a lot of nothing. Pay no attention to all of that Sturm und Drang. It was a big nothing, so pay no attention. Now, obviously, a lot of people are expressing concerns and questions about what Donald Trump is going to do, and one of his big targets appears to be the military-industrial complex and reining in the out-of-control military spending. I mean, the Pentagon is just flinging money all over the place. They've managed to just outright lose track of $6 trillion, not quite the $9 trillion the Federal Reserve misplaced and can't account for, but that's a lot of money. And a lot of it, the money that they have tracked, has gone, first of all, for a lot of wars that went nowhere, and for a lot of these whiz-bang, high-tech weapons programs that are not working out very well. The F-22 still asphyxiating its pilots. The Freedom-class littoral combat ships, drivetrain problems. The Independence-class littoral combat ships hull corrosion issues, like apparently somebody forgot what zinc sacrificial anodes are supposed to be for. The Zumwalt stealth destroyer, drivetrain problems. Now they're at the point of saying the new whiz-bang aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, may never actually be suitable for use in combat. Its magnetic catapult system is actually breaking the aircraft that it's launching. And, of course, Donald Trump's first target is going to be that F-35. The costs have gone completely out of control, and more experts are looking at it and saying it is not going to be worth the money. It has got so many problems, hundreds and hundreds of problems. Now, of course, the Air Force has declared by imperial edict that it's ready for deployment, and they've actually started deploying some of these things. But, I mean, the problems are just amazing. Still can't fly in the rain, can't fly in the fog, can't get too near lightning. That very expensive helmet system that is supposed to fuse all of the video cameras to allow the pilot to essentially see all the way around the aircraft like it's made out of glass, that still doesn't work. The networked radar systems don't work. It'll confuse how many targets are out there as it tries to sort out what's coming in from the other aircraft in the squadron. It's the insulation in the fuel tanks is deteriorating rapidly. It's jamming the engines and causing them to explode. And it looks impressive at the air shows, but that's about it. And Trump is basically taking a good, hard look at that. Now then, interesting, well, first of all, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the incoming Trump administration less than 24 hours away. And there was an interesting article that came on out from counterpunch.org, the Trump speech that no one heard. And it was a speech Trump made that was ignored by the corporate media, because this was the speech where he came on out and said that he wants to fundamentally change the behavior of the United States government in terms of how they interact with other countries. He wants to pull back on all of this intervention and overthrow and coup d'etat, and he wants to work together with Russia to establish regional security, fight terrorism, and most of all, bring back trade, which will bring back the jobs. And the corporate media is still refusing to deal with reality. Apparently last night, during CNN's broadcast of the Situation Room, Wolf Blitzer aired a segment with a chyron featuring the headline "Developing Now," and basically Blitzer and correspondent Brian Todd were coming out with this idea that assassinating Trump would allow Barack Obama to stay in power. Now, first of all, it sounds like he's inciting to assassination. Second of all, Wolf Blitzer apparently does not understand how the U.S. government works. If Trump is assassinated, Mike Pence becomes the president. If both Trump and Pence are assassinated, the Speaker of the House becomes the president. There is a long line of succession already coded into law. There is no way Barack Obama can stay in power short of an armed coup d'etat. Now, apparently, a man down in Florida tweeted his threat to assassinate Donald Trump, and he's been arrested, obviously. And it turns out he's a close family friend of the Clintons. And he once donated $20,000 to the Democratic National Committee. And apparently, this suspect, Dominic Puopolo Jr., his mother had died in one of the airplanes that flew into the World Trade Center on 9/11, and Hillary Clinton delivered the eulogy at the funeral. And so he was out there on Twitter threatening Trump's life. Now, I don't know if he's on too many prescription antidepressants. I mean, first of all, anybody who was seriously planning to do something to Donald Trump, they're not going to announce it on Twitter. Or if they do, they're an idiot. Now, Director of the CIA, Brennan, is now trying to backpedal on that ridiculous Trump dossier about the prostitutes and the bed in the hotel room in Moscow and everything. Now he's saying he never actually read it himself. I had nothing to do with it. I'm back. Never even really saw it. Interesting little article over in Russia Today, and it's basically following up on a comment I made earlier in the week, where John McCain was part of the pipeline that passed that dossier along to the intelligence agencies from which it was leaked to the media, and now he's trying to save his own skin by backing off and saying, oh, that was a terrible thing to do. Yeah, John, but you did it. So Obama has less than 24 hours left as President of the United States of America. He's commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence. I think a lot of people are very happy about that. But has now officially denied clemency for Leonard Peltier. Still no word about a blanket pardon for Hillary, but there are still some 20 hours left to go on that. And I'm sure Hillary's sweating bullets about that one, because Trey Gowdy, as part of the new incoming Congress, has now joined the Intelligence Committee. And that means Trey Gowdy will be front and center as Congress tries to get to the bottom of these Russian hacking claims made by Hillary Clinton's campaign to basically distract from the fact that they really did all that stuff that was in those leaked emails. And obviously conservatives and people who are just fond of justice in general, they're thrilled about this. Go get him, Trey. And we are seeing another article coming out of Investment Watch blog that Trump is seriously thinking about ordering a full, massive investigation into all of Hillary Clinton's crimes. And I rather doubt that Donald Trump fully appreciates what he's likely to find in there. Now, interestingly enough, one of the other commutations, along with all the drug dealers, I mean, Obama's just letting everybody out. He commuted the sentence of Oscar Lopez Rivera, not Rivero, no relation, who's a member of this Puerto Rican militant group and FALN. And, of course, FALN and his family are overjoyed. So FALN terrorists get pardons, but not Leonard Peltier. Something a little screwy there. We found an article from a while back where an FALN victim's son said Hillary Clinton was a key figure in pardoning the entire terror group. So apparently Hillary has a bunch of terrorists who are feeling beholden to her. Now, after blaming Russia with no evidence for Hillary's election loss, Obama is now blaming Putin for the deterioration in Russia and U.S. relations. Because we all know that parking tons and tons of weapons and hundreds of thousands of soldiers on a nation's border is not a reason for us not to be friends anymore. Obama's trying to basically rewrite his legacy, and nobody's buying it. It really is. Now, as a parting shot at personal freedom and what little is left of our privacy, apparently Loretta Lynch issued a secret order where apparently the NSA is now allowed to share any of the data they collect on you with any other intelligence agency or law enforcement agency based on this standard of so-called government need. In other words, somebody can call up the NSA and say, I need to see what Michael Rivero is ordering from eBay today, and the NSA will turn it over. And this, of course, is all a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, as you know, a recent survey showed that CNN is the least trusted corporate media news source in America, which prompted the president of CNN to say their credibility had never been higher, which everybody laughed at. But the president of CNN is now off the hook because there's been another survey, and MSNBC is now the least trusted TV news source. So I'm sure over there at MSNBC they're going, we're number one, we're number one, no, wait a minute, this is a bad thing, isn't it? Yes, it is a bad thing, actually. And the corporate media is still writhing and dancing and twisting and trying to figure out what they're going to do. And over at ZDNet, they ran this ridiculous article on how social media is crippling democracy and how it must be stopped because, that independent media and social media, they're destroying truth, justice, and the American way. Now, the reality is social and independent media has actually restored democracy by bringing back the open sharing of ideas and diverse points of view. This is a threat to the corporate media, whose job it is to maintain the status quo while assuring us that we are still a democracy, despite the obvious election fraud that took place during the Democratic primaries and the general election, and to the political elites whose lies, fraud, and deceptions, like Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, are now being exposed for everybody to see. And if you go to this article and you read the comments, nobody else is buying it. They're calling the author of this, a crybaby. So, another little article coming out of Huffington Post. The media's existential crisis, by which they mean the corporate media. And basically talking about the fact that Donald Trump is clearly responding to an adversarial corporate media by being an adversary. And they're talking about that meeting back on January 11th, where Donald Trump called in the heads of all the corporate media, who went into the meeting expecting that Donald Trump was going to kiss and make up and say, you guys are still in charge of the information flow from the administration to the public, and instead, they got an apprentice-style dressing down. And they deserve it. Donald Trump is absolutely right. He wants to communicate directly to the American people through social media and independent media because he doesn't trust the corporate media to accurately and faithfully report what he's actually saying, because of all the spin doctoring and selective editing and questionable interpretation that's already taken place. Now, in terms of corporate media bias and spin, here's a good example. There's an article that came out of Blacklisted News, and it's talking about a recent corporate media survey, which came up with the result: 58% of Americans don't think Russian hacking changed the election. 56% believe U.S. should improve relations with Russia. Now, those are good numbers, except for the fact that this poll started out presuming the story of Russian hacking was true and presenting it as true to the people taking the poll. That's a very dishonest thing to do. They should have started out saying, do you believe the story of Russian hacking, and then go from there. That's like running a poll saying, do you think the Blue Fairy is diabetic? Where you're not allowed to question whether the Blue Fairy actually exists or not. Now, apparently in his farewell address, Obama actually came on out and described the DNC emails as having been leaked. Not stolen, not hacked. He used the word leaked. So maybe now that he's leaving the White House, he doesn't care to maintain the lies anymore. Maybe he'd just be sick and tired of the whole thing. Now, there's another interesting article, and it came out of Global Research. And it's talking about Vermont's decentralists questioning authority, power, and wealth. And this is a group that began about 40 years ago that was tired of the Republicans and tired of the Democrats, aren't we all? And they wanted to form a third way called decentralism, where they wanted to get away from this over-concentration of power, authority, and wealth in a few tiny hands. And it's a really good idea. And their statement of purpose is, we oppose political and economic systems which demand obedience to the dictates of elite groups while ignoring abuses by those who operate the controls. And it sounds like a really wonderful system. And it is. And I'll tell you why when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about Vermont's decentralists. This is a group that actually began about 40 years ago to try and form a third party that was based on reversing the trend of concentration of wealth, power, and authority in the hands of just a few. But we already know this is going to work, because it's the way the United States was originally begun, where the power and authority were reserved to the states themselves, the counties, the individuals, and that central government was deliberately hamstrung to not be a threat to personal liberty and freedom and wealth, the ability to better your life through hard work. That's how this country began. So these decentralists are onto the right idea of basically going back to a system we already know from history works very well for the nation and its people. It's terrible for the bankers, terrible for the politicians, but it's great for the people. All righty, let's talk a little bit about the war zones. Basically, Syria, there's still some flare-ups and some opposition by these surviving U.S.-backed forces. But overall, with Russia and Turkey now coordinating their airstrikes and working with the Syrian army, they are rapidly advancing on multiple fronts against what is left of this manufactured revolution that the U.S. started 5 years ago. And the U.S. is still not giving up, at least for the next 20 hours. They're increasing their airdrops of weapons to the opposition forces in Syria. And, of course, it's illegal for them to do that. They have no permission to be in Syrian airspace. And it may well be, and I mentioned this yesterday, it may well be that the U.S. was hoping that either Syria or Russia would shoot one of these aircraft down and really get that war going. But Assad and Putin have showed remarkable restraint. They know that after Trump is sworn in, everything is going to change. And we're going to pull back from this brink of a third world war, probably with mushrooms. But Obama still wants to get his licks in on his way out. He's deploying more troops. He's sending all this stuff. He sent B-2 stealth bombers to strike ISIS camps in Libya. And maybe what he's trying to do is to kill off all the people in ISIS who knew about the secret supply lines from the United States. But he sent those Spirit bombers in there to just wipe them all out. And they killed dozens of people. How much do those B-2s cost? Now then, Hawaii's Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard and Dennis Kucinich are on their way to Syria on a fact-finding and peace mission. It's time to pull the plug on all this stuff. And I got to tell you, not just because she's from here in Hawaii, I am turning into a huge fan for Tulsi Gabbard. And she's doing all these wonderful things. And I know she's a Democrat. I still wish Trump could have found a position for her in his administration. So she's on her way to Syria with Dennis Kucinich. Meanwhile, now that Trump is about to be the president, Russia has now invited the United States to participate in Syria talks in Astana. And this invitation has been extended by Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. And they might actually accomplish something worthwhile with President Trump. Meanwhile, there's a lot of inertia behind this ramp up to war with Russia. Britain is now sending military hardware, tanks and so forth, through the Channel Tunnel. And supposedly it was this secret midnight training operation to prepare for war in Europe. And they sent them all through, ran around the countryside, then brought them all back. But everybody is practicing and practicing and practicing. And the people of Europe, they don't think it's a very good idea. They've already had 2 world wars fought on their territory. They really don't feel like having that again. Meanwhile, the British press is still ramping up the propaganda for war against Russia. And they're still, and they don't even have any facts or anything. I'll give you some examples when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I see the children are attacking my server again, so we'll let them have their little tantrum. Meanwhile, getting on back to this, the British press is getting more and more irresponsible. They're trying to ramp up more rhetoric against Russia, and they've got nothing to work on. Russia hasn't done anything. There's no evidence Russia is a threat. Their stories are worded in phrases like, it's entirely feasible that Russia could do this. Russia may do that. Putin may be planning this. Well, frankly, Putin could be planning to flap his arms and fly to the moon. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Now, in the case of the Telegraph, they were quoting a report from the Washington Post, which now has been retracted with a full-on apology by the editor. But the Telegraph ran the story without any apology whatsoever or clarification that the story had been discredited. It's still out there. Now, this story just came on in, and this is just beautiful. The other day we were talking about how CNN was still going on and on about Trump was not a legitimate president. We were talking about how CNN's Wolf Blitzer is out there saying, well, you know, if Trump gets assassinated, Obama can stay in power. And then CNN turned around and asked for press passes to the Deplorable, which is this pro-Trump inauguration party being held tonight at the National Press Club. Now, MAGA 3X, the group that is organizing the ball, just turned them down. CNN will not be given press credentials to attend this. And the reason they stated was because CNN is no longer seen as a credible institution of journalism, and they're saying it's not partisan because they have issued press passes to journalists from the New Yorker, New York Magazine, Fox, and various others. They're just saying, we have no confidence that you would cover us fairly. And they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Bill in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
Biodegradable.
Man, I tell you, I'm a huge fan. Been listening to you for, I'd say, about 3 or 4 years. I'll cut to the chase, but dude, you are just awesome. I'm not kidding, man. You are awesome. I watch Alex Jones and a couple of those other guys, too, but you're the best, man.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words.
No, that's all right. I wanted to discuss something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and you actually brought it up Tuesday, because I watch you on YouTube, and I have to watch the program from the day before. But anyway, without getting into all that, it was about the Federal Reserve, and I've been watching, listening to you for years. And one of the things that you constantly kind of say is that you wish a solution could be brought around without violence and whatever, blowing everybody up or getting our country back. Well, to me, from listening to you and absorbing different information from the internet, from the globalist agenda, it goes back way further. And with as smart as you are, you already know that. But just taking it back to the age of the Industrial Revolution, when they sunk the Lusitania, and then Pearl Harbor, they infiltrated the Congress. December 23rd with the Federal Reserve, that's when the cancer really started. But
yes.
Then they made it public as far as they put their signature on it when they killed JFK. And to me, the head of the snake is the Federal Reserve. So if everybody would get together and protest in the streets in front of Wall Street and shut them down and protest against the Federal Reserve, I would never condone anything like Ferguson or Black Lives Matter. But when those people get into the street and they shut everything down, people start, even if it's wrong what they're doing, I'm not condoning it, but if you have the same kind of organization and people getting together like if people that listen to you, listen to Alex Jones, listen to Matt Drudge, all these thousands and thousands and thousands of people that would get into the street, not just one time, on a constant basis, and start a campaign to shut the Federal Reserve down. We have had enough.
I agree with you, but
Like,
I want to clarify something. It's not enough to shut down the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve is not, in fact, the head of the snake. The head of the snake is the Bank of International Settlements. And history has shown that if a government and a people eject a private central bank from their nation, then all of the other nations enslaved to private central banks will work to re-enslave them. That has repeated throughout history. Now, the good news is, because of economic globalism, all these private central banks are now linked together, and it looks like a major crash is unavoidable. We could see all the private central banks collapse at the same time, and at that point, we need millions of people in the streets saying no more private central banking. Let's go back to government-issued currencies, a public currency managed as a public utility, and not a privatized for-profit operation here. Now, right now, the Federal Reserve is on the defensive. They can't account for some $9 trillion. They're deathly afraid of a full audit, because they certainly don't want the American people to learn just how much real wealth has been sucked out of our pockets into the pockets of the bankers for the privilege of using their pieces of paper with colored ink all over it.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you say, man, constantly. Every day I'm like, wow, this guy's so smart, man. But it's like they have so much power. Who's going to audit them? I mean, who's going to stop them? And I'm not saying it's a total head of the snake, but if everybody would get together, black, white, yellow, brown, don't matter, everybody, just get together.
Let me give you an insight. Let me give you an insight here. No, we don't need violence. And they're actually quite fragile, because what holds up private central banking is the belief in the mind of the public that this is the way the world is supposed to be. And so what we all need to become is private central bank heretics and say, no, this isn't a healthy monetary system. This is a system of covert enslavement through perpetual debt creation. And when the people stop believing in the bank, the private central banking system, and they stop involving themselves in it, we're already seeing the banks trying to make it mandatory that you will run your life through their banks. And that only betrays how afraid they are that people don't believe that private central banking is a good institution anymore.
Yeah, I really wish Trump would. I mean, I'm not just saying it, man, because I'm a listener. I really wish Trump would give you a position as a counselor, or, you know, somebody who, if you don't want to work for the government or whatever, Secretary of State, I get all that, but like somebody that's in his council that would, he knows a lot about everything, just like you do. I'm telling you, man, because he's really trying to do the right thing, and I'm just scared that the numbers are going like JFK was our 35th, he's our 45th. He has a lot in common with JFK, even though JFK was a Democrat. You know what I'm saying? It's like these guys don't play fair. They play dirty pool. Look at all the millions of people they've killed. All wars are banker wars.
Yeah, but again, it's a different world. It's a different world. The private central bankers and the CIA and all these other people were able to get away with those things in the past because the American people were trusting and naive and blind. They were dependent on the corporate media, which fed them the cover stories about crazed lone nut assassins and all the rest of that nonsense. Those days are gone. And there may well be an attempt on Donald Trump. But it's going to be done by people who are going to have to deal with the realization that the official story is probably not going to be believed. And, you know, doing something that overt, trying to assassinate Donald Trump, could actually precipitate the complete collapse of the United States of America, the way the Soviet Union went.
Can I say one more thing, sir?
Yes, sir, real quick.
I mean, it won't be me, and I know it definitely won't be a man like you with your ideas and your intelligence level, but personally, I'm tired of them shooting us and we don't shoot back. When they blew JFK's head off, and now it's pretty much common knowledge with CNN, they're on the TV saying now, oh, well, if something would happen to Donald Trump, we're just going to have Obama pick a new president for it. Well, you know what? I wish, and I'm not saying I wish, I'll take that back because I don't want them knocking on my door. If a day, I'll just put it this way, if a day ever came where a retired Army sniper veteran who just had enough, and then George Soros is going out to get his cappuccino one day and they blew his head off, I wouldn't cry over it, because they're the ones doing all the shooting. They're the ones killing everybody. They're the ones killing the working man. They're killing our dreams.
Well, you're aiming in the wrong direction, and obviously we do not encourage violence because that only justifies greater repression on the part of the government. We're already in a fight to maintain our Second Amendment rights here, so let's not give them fuel to come on back and take away my flintlock. So, but
no,
again, people like George Soros are actually a symptom of a systemic problem in which we have a system that funnels wealth to the very wealthy and makes them insanely wealthy, and they start to believe that they are gods and can just play with the planet like it's their own personal toy. And it's not just Soros, it's also Bill Gates. And the reality is that allowing people to have enough money to supersede the elected civil government, to subvert it, to overturn it, that is a threat to the national security, in my opinion, and something really ought to be done about that. But let's pursue it through...
That's the true shadow government, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but let's pursue it through the court system. Okay?
No, I agree with you. That was just my frustration level talking, and I
understand, and I hear a lot of frustration out there. Anyway, listen, Bill, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Kyle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. So I have a family member who has a significant other that is involved in the FBI, and they told me that the Trump administration has over 25,000 files, documents, dossiers on a number of government officials already in the queue to be pulled when Trump is sworn in as president.
Okay.
So it appears as though there's going to be massive investigations.
Well, they may not all be investigations, because Trump is already talking about literally cutting 20% of the federal workforce, and they may just be collecting records to see who's the dead wood and let them go, because obviously you don't want to let people go who are actually able to do the job. So I would love to see the investigations, but again, I want to see them focused on Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and everybody who was involved in that narcocracy going all the way back to 1980s Arkansas.
Well, I will say this is this young lady's first time she's been in the FBI when administration has transferred.
Let's not give out any information that's going to place her at risk, okay?
No, and she said it could all. I mean, she said she's never seen anything like it, but she's never been involved with an administration transfer before. So it might be standard operating procedure, but no one seems to think so.
Okay.
So it seems, I mean, that's an encouraging fact to me. Even if he's looking into people, events, places, it seems, even if he doesn't act on it, he wants to have a very good understanding of how many number of things work in the government and surrounding the government, which I think is extremely encouraging.
Yeah, I'd like to see a lot of this come down. I'd like to see all these corrupted people rounded up and, you know, shipped somewhere. You know, hey, we finally have a use for all those FEMA concentration camps.
Yeah, well, and I would think a large number of these files will be people who will not be attending the inauguration tomorrow.
I imagine so.
Yeah.
You know what's really amazing? not just CNN, but all these Republicans who were part of the Dump Trump campaign, and now they're absolutely indignant that they're not being considered for any jobs in the Trump administration. What did they think was going to happen? I mean,
but John McCain.
Yeah.
John McCain is the one who released this fake dossier on Trump and his prostitutes in Russia, and then he goes on TV and has the gall to condemn the person who released the document.
It is. And again, it just proves that, politicians just think in terms of PR and spin and lies, and, what's really true and factual, what makes sense, just isn't a factor anymore.
Well, that tells you a lot what they think about us. They think that we don't have any sort of memory and that we will just be fed the same old line of malarkey time and time again. And, they can say whatever they want, and there's no repercussions to it.
Well, history is against them. History is their enemy, because up until the advent of the independent media, 20 years ago, it did work that way. They could put out any nonsense whatsoever, the magic bullet theory. The corporate media would tell it to Americans, and Americans had no choice but to simply accept what they were being told. Those days are gone forever, and anybody who does not understand that and realize the need to change and evolve to deal with the new reality of a skeptical, better informed, able to self-inform American people, they're living in a dream world. They're living in the past.
Yeah, well, I've always said the greatest accomplishment of the independent media has been the ability to give context to the events that are happening around the world. Because so many times, you hear something on the news, but you don't get well, this happened 5 years ago that relates to this. You just get that little news story, and that can be spun any way that they want it to be.
Okay, well, we're coming up on a commercial break here. I think the independent media's greatest accomplishment is that we have removed from the government and the corporate media their ability to lie to the public with impunity. That is our single greatest victory. So thank you very much for the phone call, Kyle. We got to let you go. Take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Donald Trump has just arrived for the welcoming concert for the inauguration. It's at the Lincoln Memorial, and a fairly decent-sized crowd there. And Trump just paid his respects to the statue of Abraham Lincoln. And let's go back to the phones here. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Bob, are you there?
Yes. Aloha, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Oh, okay. Mike, yeah, I too am a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard. I love her foreign policy. I wonder, I think she's presidential timber, definitely for the future. I wonder what I don't know if you've heard, if you could inform us in terms of her, on her domestic policies. If she buys into all this transgender baloney, or
yeah,
she's from the Democratic
she
Party.
is a Democrat, and she does, up to a point, play the party line. In fact, I just got a mass emailing from her website saying, click to thank Obama for his 8 years of service. But again, that's just playing politics. But on certain issues, she definitely has the courage to step on out and be her own individual. And so I am expecting some amazing things from this person in the future.
Mike, what happened? First, I know a lot of the listeners are Alex Jones fans. I don't want to say anything negative about him, but I listened to him for a short period of time, but his act just gets old very quickly. And I think you have much more substance to your show, more gravitas. I was never a big Alex Jones fan, so just wanted to get that out there.
Well, I have a comment about that, and I get a lot of people who are emailing me, you're better than Alex Jones, blah, 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 blah. I'm different than Alex Jones, so let's just leave it at that here. And you have to remember, this year it marks my 10th anniversary in talk radio, and Alex Jones was the one who got me started, all the way back in 2007. Where he arranged for my first show on Genesis, and even though Alex and I do not see eye to eye on certain topics, I always do remember that, and I'm always going to be very grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to kiss up to you, but I have to tell you, I was a paid subscriber of Gerald Salente's service, and I just stopped listening to him, even after paying. I don't want to wait. I'd rather listen to you for those 3 hours than listen to him, and even though I already paid the money. So that's how much I think about your show.
Oh, you're going to turn my head. You are going to turn my head.
It's the truth. Mike, on that, the WTO demonstrations that took place in Seattle, the protests against the I believe that was in '90. I don't know if it was in Clinton's first or second term. You know, those peaceful groups, they were infiltrated with these anarchists.
Yes.
You know, the guys who were their faces covered with bandanas, and they were looting, and they gave a bad name to the other demonstrators.
That's why they were there.
Right. Do you see a possibility of that happening again? And who was behind that infiltration? Was it the government? Was it George Soros? What happened in Seattle? Do you see that happening again?
It could have been the World Trade Organization itself. I mean, it's a classic PR stunt. To discredit your opponents is to portray them as behaving badly. Anyway, listen, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, and we're going to go back and take a phone call from Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I second the Tulsi Gabbard sentiment, but I feel as though if Trump accomplishes half of what he proposes, we will see Ivanka Trump as the first female president. But I called in for another reason.
Well, before you go to that other reason, I'm going to step in there and say I am not sure about that, because Ivanka is stepping away from the politics. She moved to Washington, D.C. to be with her husband, who is in the Trump administration, but she herself is not getting involved. And so she's not building the track record that one would require to run for office. Now, we know that the Clintons are already trying to prep Chelsea for a run for Congress, to start building credibility for Chelsea to eventually be president. I'm not getting that sense from Ivanka, but of course she could change her mind over the next 8 years. But I think Ivanka was actually kind of happy right where she was, and I think maybe that she's a little leery of being closely associated with her father and living in his shadow. And I actually, when I worked in Hollywood, I used to see that a lot, where there'd be like this really big megastar, and they're trying to bring their kid along into the business. Now, sometimes it worked. Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas, obviously. But I've seen some others where you just look at the kid and you just get this sense they don't want to be there. They want to be doing something else where they can be their own person and not, oh, that's the son of this other famous person. And I think Ivanka is kind of like that.
Right. But as a trusted confidant of her dad, maybe the people will demand it. The reason I called in, Mike, was I'm hearing some disturbing news about the southern border, and that they're massing a lot of Africans and claiming they're Haitians. But these folks are fluent in Spanish, and supposedly, based on the Common Sense show, Dave Hodges, he's claiming that there are 4,000 men in Tijuana massing at the border, ready to come across. And I'm wondering, do you have any knowledge of this, or any of the listeners maybe can contribute to this? There was a gentleman, a professor at a university, that's also saying that women's body parts are being discovered, kidnaps and mutilations are occurring within the last couple months, and it is being covered in Mexican press. Any thoughts?
Well, first of all, there's a couple of complex issues going on. We certainly know that Obama is trying to flood the nation with as many illegal immigrants and refugees as he can in the next 19 hours, whatever it's going to be here. But also you need to look at the economic situation in Mexico, because of the ending of government subsidies for fuel prices. Gasoline prices have gone way up, and it is a major, major hit on the budget of the average Mexican citizen, and it's triggered riots all across the nation, and has also led to more and more people wanting to try and get into the United States. Now, over there at the border crossing near San Diego, it has been so out of control and so violent, they've actually closed that border crossing several times over the last week. They can't deal with the flood of people. So there's a couple of overlapping issues, and we need to be taking a look at that. But we're not seeing a lot about what's going on in Mexico because it's part of an ongoing process that began in South America as these economies began to fall apart and their countries are descending into chaos, and it's been moving northward slowly, and now it's right on our southern border. And it portends ill for the United States, because if there is, in fact, a major economic upset in the next several months, we could see similar chaos in the streets of America.
Right. What I found very interesting was that these African men spoke almost fluid Spanish, and that they could pass for like Dominicans or something.
How do you know they're not Dominicans?
University, now,
hang on. How do you know they're not Dominicans?
Sorry. Well, they tell you straight up that they migrated from like Peru all the way up through South America, through Central America, and into Mexico, and they were told basically like, yeah, come here, Obama will let you in.
Yeah.
And these are videos that I've seen where they're speaking into groups of men that look exhausted and weathered from their journey. But
well, I can understand why they're massing on the border, because that gate is about to get slammed shut in the next 24 hours.
Right. So, yeah, here we go again. I mean, this whole migration thing, I'm just wondering if we're not covering it enough, and maybe some of the other listeners might have some additional information. But if we have women showing up body parts now, it almost sounds like Germany.
Well, obviously under the economic pressure and so forth, I mean, lots of bad things are happening there. We've been talking about the immigration refugee problem for a long time. Now that Trump is going to be sworn in as our 45th president, the next question is, what are we going to do about it? Obviously, securing the border, building a wall, putting crocodiles in the Rio Grande, modifying the pumpkin chunkin machines to fling them back over the border. There's going to be a big problem. How do we hunt all of these illegal immigrants and refugees down for deportation? And that may in fact be at least temporarily a source of new employment for Americans, to basically bolster and clean up this mess that was left to us by Obama.
Right. Just real quick, I had an incident where an Uber driver was pulling out of a gas station, and he screeched his tires and almost hit me. And I looked in the car, and this guy was obviously of African descent. And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, Ghana or somewhere. And he laughed at in my face that he almost ran me down. And then he peeled off in a burst. And it's like these guys are coming over and being handed these Uber cars and licenses and driving around like maniacs. And I also got by a yellow cab.
At least he's getting employment, not living on welfare. Let's acknowledge, that's a positive. But the other part of it is that maybe just being here, they're getting carried away with the excitement and everything, and their ego's getting the best of them that they made it here and everything. Anyway, listen, Brendan, need to let you go. We need to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who rejoined our network, and we're going to take a call from Terry up in Oregon. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I saw a website with black Africans lining up on the border down at Tijuana, and the pictures were taken by a Mexican national. And he didn't say anything about they were speaking Spanish, but he did say that they were facilitated by the Mexican border guards. In other words, escorted there, like it was.
Oh yeah, everybody knew that was going on when these Central American, South American refugees showed up on Mexico's southern border. Mexico put them on buses and trains and sends them up to the northern border and says, "Go, bother the Texans."
Yeah, I almost got the feeling that, just reading this, that, somebody was paying the Mexican government to do this for them,
Well, again, we know that the globalists want to basically erase everybody's regional, historical, and cultural identity to make us all easier to control, because if you don't have a strong sense of self and a strong sense of community, it's easier to manipulate you.
Exactly. And, you know, I'm really confused, and I have been, and I don't go for these simple explanations. Why these people, the Germans and the Swedes, the government, would allow this. You know, some people say, oh, well, they're paid off. Well, they're just paying off to destroy their countries. You know, that doesn't make any sense.
No. They don't look at it. They don't look at it that way. They don't look at it. They're looking at it as having to clear away the old system in order to build the new globalist system. Anyway, listen, we got a bunch of phone calls, and I got a bunch of news I need to get back to, so we're going to let you go. We're going to go over to Lockie in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Great to talk with you. I wanted a couple things real quick. I wanted to comment on an article I saw on your website about a doctor who they kind of came down on him for, giving his opinion about maybe the dangers of some of the toxins in the environment, including vaccines. But real quick, first, I saw this video of Trump getting off the plane in Phoenix here in Arizona, and I got to make a comment. When I saw him pop that salute and look at this guy square in the eye, and he's got that half smile, I've never seen, from Marine myself.
Okay, we got a bad phone connection. You're getting awfully garbled there. Okay, so Trump got off the airplane and he did what?
He popped that salute to the officer there as he came onto the tarmac, and I've never seen that. Coming from a veteran myself, I've never seen that from a president. There's something about this guy. He just looked at him square in the eye, and he had that half smile that he's got. And let me tell you, it just seems so sincere. There's something about him that's just, I think, incredibly, he's got a lot of integrity. Hopefully, he'll follow through with everything. And as far as that doctor that wrote that little commentary in that article, and they really came down on him, the clinic that he was working at, I think maybe we'll see a trend, much like with the news media, that we'll see people pulling away like they're doing from the news media, and they're going to start eating good food and going to see these doctors that don't want to administer vaccines and, all these prescription drugs.
Well, I agree on the first part. I agree on the first part. Unfortunately, we're hearing very disturbing reports that the American Medical Association is now using the threat of cancellation of your medical license to enforce doctors to go along with the orthodox view of pushing vaccines and so forth. One story was talking about how there has been a new round of polio-like illness associated with the reintroduction of the oral polio vaccine. And the AMA has literally sent out a warning saying, if one of these people getting this vaccine comes down with polio, if you call it polio, you will lose your medical license. There's a bunch of other names that they're using so that the public does not become aware that we have yet another vaccine that's actually causing the disease rather than protecting you from it. And part of the problem are these attenuated pathogen vaccines, where they're actually loading the disease pathogen into your body. It's supposed to be weakened, so it will trigger the immune response in conjunction with the adjuvants, and your body will learn how to deal with it. But there have been numerous cases, including the polio oral vaccine, where the attenuated pathogen returns to full potency following administration. And it's a very reckless form of medicine, but it's all driven by the desire for profit by these giant medical corporations.
Well, me and the family, and now into the grandchildren, yet another generation, we've been going to clinics and practicing, even though I'm getting over a cold, I'm treating it with, natural remedies. But we have, even for the grandchildren now, medical doctors, they have their own, and there's something in their, what have you, the explanation that they have a medical doctor, but they treat healthcare conventionally, I guess you would say. And so,
okay, Lackey, I'm sorry to do this, but your phone connection is really breaking up, and it is almost impossible to understand you. So I'm going to let you go because I want to take one more phone call, and then I really want to get back to doing some real news. I've even getting complaining email, you're doing too many phone calls and not enough news. Well, this week I've been letting the callers do a lot more in order to save my voice. So let's take one more phone call from Bruce in Texas, and then we're going to close the lines for a while. So, Bruce, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael. I just, over the last few years, I've been just trying to have an open mind on everything that I believe was true in the past, and maybe reviewing key incidents in history. And one of the key incidents that I've kind of reversed my thinking on has been the assassination of JFK.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a website that's been taken down, at least the last time I looked, and it was called If you ever look at the Zapruder film, now I know...
okay, come on. This is a joke. This is like the driver killed... no, I mean... Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? Mike, you know, I heard you talking before, you know, when the guy was talking about Alex Jones and all that. People have to understand is we're all part of the independent media, and you pretty much have the same message, but there's differences.
Yeah.
Look, I don't agree with everything you say 100%.
Good.
And I don't agree with Alex Jones 100%. But basically, I agree with most of what you're saying, and most of you and what you and Alex Jones are saying about the New World Order is true. The only thing is there's some differences, let's say, I don't know, about Israel, I guess.
That's pretty much it.
And all that. Okay, that's no reason for you all not to cooperate with each other and not work together.
I link to his website all the time, you know, and his articles and the videos. And, you know, as the corporate media begins to crumble, now more than ever, the independent media does have to pull together and cooperate and move forward. And I don't like to see anybody attacking anybody else in the independent media. I don't want to have discussions about whether I'm better than Alex Jones or not. Alex and I definitely disagree on Israel, but I do agree with him on pretty much everything else, and I do link to his website all the time.
The same thing with Richie Allen. I mean, pretty much he and InfoWars and you agree and pretty much all the same, but there's some differences, for instance, on Islam with has to do with Richie Allen and all that. But big deal. I mean, you know, we can differ, but pretty much, I think pretty much people in the independent media see through what's really going on in this world, and there's no reason to start hating each other.
No, we're not hating each other, and you're missing the point. The fact that we all have different opinions on these things is what's going to make the independent media work, because the public has to be presented a diversity of opinions and let them make up their own mind. And there are going to be people who think Alex Jones is right on Israel. There are going to be people who think Richie Allen is right about Islam, and that's their right to make that own choice for themselves. And it's the job of any media, independent or otherwise, to simply put as many facts before the public as possible so that they can look at the facts and decide for themselves. Okay? What we have with the corporate media is basically they're dribbling out only that information that will lead people to think what the government and corporate media wants them to think. And that is coming to an end.
Exactly. I mean, look at with Roger Stone, what's happening with Roger Stone there. Nobody's, you know, they're making fun of it, like Glenn Beck, that fool, that, you know, who's not really part of the independent media. He was making fun of it, I understand.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, I take stuff like that very seriously.
So do I.
You know, I think the government is, I think we have evil in this government. I think the CIA is probably one of the most evil agencies in the world today, and it's been an evil agency almost since its inception. I believe they were behind the Kennedy. I know you think there's other people that were.
Yes.
And they probably were. But
yeah.
I think they were the main engine behind the murder of Kennedy. I think the Bushes are driving the CIA. I think the Bushes are, the Bushes are connected to them very much today.
Well, if they can't get George Herbert Walker out of the ICU, then the Bush family influence over the CIA is about to end.
Well, what about Jeb? I understand he's got quite a bit. I read Roger Stone's book about the Bush crime family. Looks to me like Jeb's got quite a bit of pull too.
Not to the extent that George Herbert Walker did, because remember, George Herbert Walker Bush, before he was president, was director of the CIA. And George W. wasn't, and neither was Jeb. And frankly, Jeb does seem to be not have the strength of personality of George Herbert Walker Bush. I have a feeling that he may be cooperating with the CIA, but I seriously doubt he has significant control over it. I would say, in fact, it's probably quite the opposite.
But you see, George Herbert Walker, even before, he never officially, as far as I know, was a CIA agent.
Yeah, but it came out in documentation. It was proven. Anyway, listen, got to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines, and when we come back from these words from our sponsors, we're going to catch up on the news. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and getting on back to the world of politics. Obama is out there with a statement saying the moment may be passing for the two-state solution. Actually, it was never really there, simply because Israel refuses to go along with that. Israel wants one state, Eretz Israel, and they think everybody else ought to just get out of the way. Because God gave us this land. And the fact that you don't believe in our God doesn't make any difference. God says we can kick you out. Now, they had that big meeting in Paris last Sunday. Netanyahu didn't show up, said it was futile. Palestinian Authority President Abbas didn't show up, so at that point it became basically little more than a coffee klatch. Meanwhile, down in Gaza, they're dealing with some serious hardship. As you know, during the repeated attacks by Israel, Israel makes a point of targeting civilian infrastructure, including the power supply. And right now, Gaza is basically getting electricity for about 3 hours per day. And they are dealing with an exceptionally cold winter. And they're freezing inside their own homes. And it is a true humanitarian crisis, but nobody wants to talk about it. Humanitarian crisis is only happening in countries the U.S. wants to invade. Meanwhile, Israel has deployed a new missile system, the Arrow 3, which is a high-altitude interceptor, to guard against Iran. Iran is going to attack us, so we're going to take all this money from the American people and deploy the Arrow 3. And a little logic here. Why would Iran attack Israel, knowing full well that the counterattack by Israel and the United States would reduce Iran to a giant puddle of green glowing glass? And second, attacking other countries is not in Iran's nature. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in over 200 years. And certainly not since the 1979 revolution that kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah. Anyway. Now, over at Fordham University, the university leadership, chancellors, whatever, have just banned a chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, saying that the political views of the members that Israel is building illegal settlements on Palestine are objectionable, even though, in point of fact, under international law and numerous resolutions by the United Nations, those settlements on Palestinian land are illegal. But you're not allowed to say that at Fordham University. I think universities need to be reminded, rather forcefully, their job is education, not political indoctrination. Israel already has most of the corporate media. Well, what am I saying? The corporate media is falling apart, so of course they're going to go to the universities to brainwash Americans, to always love Israel and sympathize with Israel. Oh, the terrorists are going to get us. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the economy, because there are some troubling indicators on the horizon. And like I said, I'm glad Donald Trump is going to become the president tomorrow. I and so many of you worked very hard to get him in there, make sure that Hillary didn't get in there, but he is inheriting a sinking ship in terms of the economy. Foreign central banks have liquidated a record $405 billion, with a B, of U.S. treasuries. since 2011. Much of that coming from China. They know what's going to happen. They're delinking. They understand that we're coming up on those treasuries not being worth a whole heck of a lot. And the reason is simple. What backs up the U.S. treasuries is your slave labor. That somewhere down the road you will have money taken from you as taxes to give to the holders of those treasury bonds. And you will get absolutely nothing in exchange for that tax money. But there's a treasury bond bubble. They've overprinted those treasury bonds, just like they've overprinted cash over at the Federal Reserve. There aren't enough Americans to redeem those treasury bonds, even if we all actually did have jobs, which we don't. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the economic news here. And the reality is, we've been hearing a lot of news about how China's economy is in trouble, China's this, China's that. The reality, though, is that whatever's going wrong in China pales in significance to what's going on here in the United States. And according to this article over in governmentslaves.info, China is about to take over, or shall we say overtake the United States as the world's economic leader. And there's a very simple reason for that. China manufactures products to sell. The U.S. has moved away from that. Wall Street is in love with this idea that if you just take a bunch of money and you shake it back and forth, it'll magically grow. And they have rigged the system so that it actually works that way. And it brings them immense wealth at the expense of everybody else. But it doesn't actually make the nation richer, wealthier as a whole. In fact, quite the contrary here. Now, I mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again. There are serious problems over at the Federal Reserve. They're either very sloppy bookkeepers or there is something the American people are not being told. Federal Inspector General Elizabeth Coleman either will not or cannot explain where $9 trillion vanished to inside the Federal Reserve. There's a gap on the publicly available accounting. Nobody knows where it went. Big secret. We're not... You have no business asking the Federal Reserve. Remember back during the campaign when Donald Trump was asking questions about the management of the Federal Reserve, and Democrats and liberals were out there saying, you're not allowed to question the Federal Reserve. You're a heretic. They will burn you at the stake in the town square if you dare criticize the Federal Reserve. Now, this issue of the $9 trillion, and remember, everything the Federal Reserve issues is considered a loan at interest. $9 trillion works out to about $3,000 for every living man, woman, and child in the United States, plus the accruing interest. Now, this scandal may be the wedge that finally allows Congress, or emboldens Congress, to go ahead and demand a full and complete audit of the Federal Reserve, which has never been done in 100 years. And the Federal Reserve definitely does not want that to happen. When Ron Paul was out there talking about a full audit, the Federal Reserve issued a veiled threat. They would crash the economic system if you dared look inside their books. And it's easy to understand why. They don't want you, the American people, to find out just how much real wealth has been sucked out of your pockets and put into the pockets of the bankers solely for the privilege of using their little bits of paper and ink. Because private central banking is a scam. It always has been. They've been playing it on the human race for 300 years. And it's time for it to go away. Now, over at Davos, Alibaba's Jack Ma dropped a real bombshell. A number of people don't want to face up to. Certainly the U.S. doesn't want to face up to. Certainly the U.S. doesn't want you to know about this. Over the past 30 years, the United States government has spent $14 trillion of your dollars on wars all over the world. That's a huge amount of money. This was all because of this American empire dream, the project for the new American century. And this $14 trillion is for the wars themselves and does not include the vast sums of money that are spent just on the defense complex itself. So if you're wondering why it is our roads are cracked, our schools are run down, trains are falling off the tracks, why the nation's infrastructure is crumbling, that's why. We've been living in a wartime economy. They didn't want you to know it, but that's been the reality. We're going to be a long time recovering from this. It's going to take a lot of work to build our nation's infrastructure back up, and it is important that we do that. We have to have clean, safe drinking water coming from those faucets. We have to have good roads and good rails in order to speed commerce along. You can't have a prosperous nation without a good, solid infrastructure to support it. Now, we've been talking a lot about the student loan scam, and that's exactly what it is. Costs for college and university have soared way out of step with the rate of inflation. At the same time, sources of funding for college like scholarships have dried up. Because the model is, if you want to go to college, and we promise you'll have a high-paying job when you get on out, because the world needs more art history majors and social justice warriors, and they lure these kids into these usurious student loans. And now we find out that the largest student loan servicer is accused of cheating its borrowers. And the federal government is suing Navient, which is the nation's largest student loan servicer. And the students didn't see they were being cheated because instead of learning math and accounting, they were learning how to be social justice warriors and art history experts. Now, we already know how the U.S. government was fibbing about the unemployment. We were talking last week about how the U.S. government has been caught out fibbing about the rate of inflation. And now, according to this story coming out of Government Slaves, and they in turn are reporting from the Wall Street Journal, the government is covering up the scale of the student loan default problem. More students are defaulting on or simply failing to pay back their college loans than the U.S. government previously reported. It's a huge, huge issue. And it's very hard for Americans to decide what they're going to do. It's very hard for Americans to actually plan for the future when the government and the corporate media are just lying about how wonderful everything is. And obviously there is a huge problem. And I think we're going to see that that is going to be Donald Trump's single biggest challenge. Remember that big stink over in Greece where Papandreou, working with Goldman Sachs, succeeded in concealing the true scale of Greece's debt through this currency swap scam. And then when Papandreou stepped down and his successor walked in and finally got to see the real books, and he went, oh, boy, are we in trouble. I have a feeling Donald Trump is going to have that moment as well. Once he's in the White House and he's actually being shown the real data, he's going to realize what a mess he's just inherited. We might see Donald Trump get up there and say, you know, maybe a recount wouldn't be such a bad idea. Okay, up in Indiana, they're getting ready to close the Kellogg's Snacks plant by September. It's a long way off. And given the recent revelations about what is in these packaged snack foods for children, that might not entirely be an entirely bad thing, as it were. Remember Sports Authority? They went bankrupt in a big way. And apparently the Sports Authority executives have gone to court demanding that they still be paid their expected bonuses. And apparently the court agreed. Because the new model in the United States is you can fail miserably and we're going to give you a lot of money. If you succeed, we're going to come down on you as hard as we can. But if you fail spectacularly, we're going to take care of you. Story coming out of MarketWatch.com saying that there are any one of several announcements that Donald Trump can make about the economy that will probably send gold prices soaring. Now that, of course, is going to be a problem for the banks, who are going to see people empty those negative interest rate savings accounts and get into metal, who are going to close their stock portfolios and be seeking safe havens. That's the buzzword, a safe haven from the coming turmoil. This is why there's this big push for cashless societies and gold and silver bands all over the globe. They don't want you pulling your money out of their system. Even though it's your money, they say, you leave it here, you go down the drain with us. So let's talk a little bit about the immigration and refugee crisis. And that, too, is out of control. There's a story that came on out from Breitbart. And this particular story is about Paris. But it's actually affecting all of Europe because of all the violence, assaults, theft, rapes that are going on with all these refugees pouring on in there. Tourists are now afraid to visit Paris. Now, a big part of Paris, and indeed France's revenue, is based on tourism. And the tourists are staying away. And it isn't just France. It's Germany as well. It's all these European countries that used to be wonderful places you'd go and visit and absorb the culture or do some shopping. And the tourism numbers are plummeting because people are afraid. They're hearing all these stories about no-go zones and how the police simply can't deal with this out-of-control behavior by the refugees. And I'll bet you George Soros didn't think about that. Probably George Soros doesn't even care. No price is too great to pay for the dream of a single global government and a one-world society. But it's a big problem. Amazingly enough, tourists are now going to Russia. They're scared to go to Europe. They're out there going to Russia. A lot of good things to see in Russia. The Hermitage. Claire and I would love to see that. They've recreated the Amber Room. That would be amazing to see. It's amazing how government policy has destroyed tourism. And not just in Europe. I mean, here in Hawaii, our tourism literally took it in the teeth from TSA. And our local tourism authority likes to talk about we have an 80% occupancy rate in our various hotels. What they don't talk about is how many resorts and hotels have simply gone out of business completely. All over the state. You drive up the leeward side of Oahu, and you will see all these resorts are just boarded up. They're just sitting there. The golf courses are becoming overgrown. Now then, over in Great Britain, at the University of Cambridge, French philology and linguistics professor Wendy Ayers-Bennett, while acknowledging that people moving to Britain should learn English, which is the courteous thing to do, she's out there saying that the people of Britain need to learn Polish, Punjabi, and Urdu to make the refugees feel more welcome. So, on top of everything else, she thinks people should learn 3 new foreign languages that they're never likely to use in ordinary, regular life. Now, I get really upset at people who come to the United States and then demand we speak their language. We saw that a lot in Los Angeles, and that really is very rude. When I've traveled around the world, I make it a point to try and learn as much of that language as I can before I arrive. And when I was working in Europe back in the 1980s, I was trying to pick up Italian and German because I was flipping back and forth between Italy and Germany from week to week on this computer animation gig. And I wasn't very good at it. And most of the people in Europe speak excellent English anyway. But they respected the fact that I'd made the effort, as opposed to Americans who were visiting and simply ran around assuming everybody would speak English to them, that they didn't have to learn the local language. I remember this story one weekend when I was in Germany. One of the animators I was working with who lived there, we decided we needed a day off because it was a killer schedule. And he took me out to Herrenchiemsee, which is this island palace of Ludwig III, the Mad King of Bavaria. He's the same guy who built Neuschwanstein. Everybody's seen it. Disney copied it for his castle at Disneyland. But Ludwig also built a palace on this island, Herrenchiemsee, and it is a copy of Versailles. And it wasn't completed because Ludwig died under possibly questionable circumstances. But it's amazing to see. Anyway, so we're on the shore waiting for the boat to go over to the island, and this group of tourists from Texas come on in, and unfortunately behaved like Texans. And they were irritating and annoying everybody. And I was sitting there with the people I was with saying, please don't tell anybody I'm from that country. Because it was a little embarrassing. But if you're going to come to the United States of America, you should learn our language, our ways. And yes, you can have your own religion and your own ways in your own home, but learn to fit in. Even Teddy Roosevelt said exactly the same thing. Why is that such a difficult concept? And so for this linguistics professor to tell the British people that they should learn Polish, Punjabi, and Urdu because we have to make the refugees feel welcome. I have a better idea. Let's stop all these U.S. wars of aggression that made all these people refugees in the first place. And they'll go back home where they were obviously much happier to begin with and get us out of this nonsense here. Now, over at Swarthmore College, they have decided to offer a class asking, is God a white supremacist? And oh yeah, that's going to open up lots and lots of job opportunities for those graduates. Colleges and universities aren't what they were when I went to school, and that is really very obvious at that point. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And Toby Keith is now on the stage performing at the Make America Great Again Welcome Celebration. And they've got a pretty sizable crowd there. Certainly a lot more than the anti-Trump protests. Some of them have happened. Now, they're not doing anything destructive. They're not chaining the trains or anything else they were promising. But I'm looking at this article about the Stop Trump protests, and I'm noticing that all the photographs of the protesters, you know, are very narrow angles, and that's always a dead giveaway that hardly anybody showed up. And I'm looking at this right now, and I'm seeing maybe 50 people. Maybe 50 people. It's hardly what one would call a throng. So they're going to have their little, I was there to protest Trump, and feel good about themselves, and so forth and so on. Okay, now then. Getting on back to education. Apparently over at Kellogg Community College, they're being sued because campus police arrested 3 conservative students while they were handing out copies of the Constitution and signing students up for a conservative student organization. Because, by golly, if you're going to be at the Kellogg Community College, you are a liberal, and you will never be anything but a liberal. And I hope these students win the lawsuit, because we have this little thing in the United States called the First Amendment. Right to freedom of expression. The right to peaceably assemble with people of like political minds. And it really is totally, totally out of control. Now then, getting on back to Chelsea Manning, who's going to be released from prison in May. Julian Assange just kind of flip-flopped on his coming back to the United States. Yesterday he said he was going to do that. Then early today he was saying, well, the deal was for a full pardon and immediate release, and therefore he didn't feel obligated to stand by the deal. And then later on in the day he said, yes, after Chelsea Manning is released, Julian Assange will come to the United States of America. We are going to have to create a huge public furor that Julian Assange should not be prosecuted. And there's an important legal point that needs to be made here. Unless Julian Assange contacted a whistleblower and solicited classified information, he's not technically guilty of espionage. It's a very fine point anybody in journalism needs to remember. If somebody hands you a leak, you're legally in the clear. You can't be prosecuted. If you say, can you bring me more, then you're in trouble. And you need to keep that in mind. So unless they can prove that Julian Assange went to Chelsea Manning and said, send me these videos, or went to the DNC leaker and say, can you steal some emails for me, technically he can't be prosecuted, and we need to remind everybody about that. We're going to take a break for our station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. Hi, I'm Erica. Welcome back to the show, hour number 3. And we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines again if you want to call on in. Now, over in Iran, they've had a high-rise building collapse, 17 stories. And it caught fire. They fought the fire for hours and hours and hours, and finally the building came on down. And the reason this is significant is that all of the defenders of the orthodox 9/11 story are pointing to this building saying, see, steel frame buildings can come down from fire. See, World Trade Center 7 could have just come down from the fires in those few offices. Well, as it turns out, there's a couple of issues. First of all, the building is 50 years old, was 50 years old. It was certainly not built to the same standards of construction that you see in the United States in general. And remember, World Trade Center building number 7 was built beyond the normal building standards because it housed federal government offices. And as it turns out, after all the brouhaha, two bits of information surfaced. First of all, it wasn't really a steel frame building. Most of it was rebar reinforced concrete, which doesn't do well in a fire. Second, while the building was originally built as a residential unit, apparently some of the units had been converted to storage spaces for inventory for the adjacent shopping mall, and were probably carrying a much heavier load on the floor than the building was initially designed for. So this is kind of a non-issue in that regard. Now, over in Italy, they just got hit by 4 powerful earthquakes in 4 hours. And it certainly rattled people because of last year's major quake. And there's a tremendous amount of concern over the fact that there is a supervolcano deep underneath the Naples area. And they're not exactly sure what's going on. Complicating efforts to find out what damage, injuries, and so forth these recent quakes done is that part of Italy is blanketed by heavy snow from the unusually severe winter weather. And in fact, these quakes may have triggered this massive avalanche that hit an Italian hotel, and apparently there have been a lot of deaths there as well, up to 30 people. Now, Austria is experiencing their coldest January in 11 years. Meanwhile, over in Europe, they're just seeing all this amazing stuff. Apparently, in the Danube River, a fox was taking a drink of water and fell in and literally flash froze. They hauled out this block of ice with a fox in it. And there's ice forming that is starting to clog hydroelectric dams. And apparently late crops, attempts at bumper crops, have now been killed by the frosts that are all over there. There's a Fox affiliate came on out and described this as the Energizer winter. It keeps snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing. What are we getting from the corporate media? Oh, 2016 was the hottest year on record. And they were woefully short of facts, just full of superlatives. The temperature soared past last year. It was this. It was blown past, trouncing. And no actual numbers. And so over at thefederalist.com, they did a little bit of digging, and they were finally able to track down the actual data. And apparently, according to NOAA, 2016 was hotter than 2015 by just 1/100th of a degree centigrade. The margin of error for the temperature monitoring system is 1/10 of a degree centigrade, meaning this claimed increase is well within the margin of error. But they went out with this, and everybody's carrying it. Oh, yes, 2016, the hottest year on record. Pay no attention to that snow and ice out there. We, the corporate media, will tell you what to believe, and you should believe the world is warming, and it's all the fault of human activity. All right, we're going to go take a phone call here. Blaze in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Okay, I'm having trouble hearing your phone call. Hello?
Hello?
Blaze, are you there?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what's on my mind. Mrs. DeVos was being, confirmed for our education secretary, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I agree 100% with that. And I like Ms. DeVos and everything because she's for charter schools. You know, then the report came out that the USA was rated 3rd from the bottom in testing in the world.
Yes. Thank you, Common Core.
The money... I'm sorry?
I said thank you, Common Core.
Yeah, thank you, Common Core. You know, rated... Okay, so it's from the bottom of the test. Okay, so we have this... You always talk about how we've got this great, thing with all the world government and all this stuff and like that. And what gets me is that people, the everyday people, spend all this money on these public schools and big government and all this and that, and they spend millions and millions of dollars on this education. I just can't, and I was not really even big into this till my taxes got raised on education. And I said to myself, man, I mean, nothing's getting done with these students. Some of them glide through, and then we look at the end result with this, and they're sitting in their parents' basement. Well, I've got a kid right now. I got one that's actually doing really great. He's programming robots in a plant because I helped him. I'm a contractor. And I helped him get the job because I was doing work for a company that was, out there. And I says, this is great. And I met the owner, and he says, well, what's your son's doing? I says, well, he's going to school. And he says, he's really good at this. He's taking robotics. And he says, well, man, bring him in. Let me talk to him. And I got him in. So I didn't have no, problem with that. It was great. So he's working, he's working right now. And then I'm looking at all this stuff. I go, we spend all this money. Then one thing that blew my mind, Mike, is there was a superintendent for a school district in my area making $265,000 a year.
Yes.
And she only has 2,400 students. And I started doing the math. I'm going, this is incredible. Then I started looking at the districts of all these counties, of all these states involved in all this education. But then what hit me is we're rated 3rd from the bottom in the world. How can this be? You talk about where's the justice in this? It makes me sick. We should be at the top.
Yeah, we really should. Until you understand that all public schools everywhere follow what's called the Prussian model, where the purpose of the public school is to turn the children into something that is useful to the government as opposed to themselves and their families. The problem is that over the last couple of decades, there has been a conscious desire to dumb down the American people, to basically make it impossible for them to think and analyze what's going on around them. And most education today consists of rote memorization and repetition, usually about things like global warming and drowning polar bears and so forth, because every tyrannical government in history wants their people ignorant so that the people can't figure out what's being done to them. The problem with that is the more ignorant you make your people, the less they're able to actually do productive work, either within the nation or in the global marketplace. So it's a two-edged sword. And we've been talking about the dumbing down of America, you know, pretty much as long as we've been running the website and doing the talk radio show. And
thank you so much, thank you. And I'll tell you, there's got to be a stopgap here, because we are being controlled now. Like, look at now the baby boomers are going into a new level where they're getting so much older they can't even afford to pay. They're not having kids anymore. So there's some areas of the country where there's nobody going to school, and they're still bringing it up, charging more. We need new school buses. There's no one going to school. There's 3 kids on the bus. They forgot about the demographics. There's nobody there.
No, it's all just a big money-making scam. I mean, all of these institutions, whether it's education or science or whatever, they don't want their budgets to be cut. And so they'll always work to keep their budgets where they are, even if the need for what they're doing is vanishing. And it's unfortunately an aspect of the system, and this failure and corruption comes down from the very, very top. And I'm hoping that our new education...
Wait till they have to pay their pensions. Wait till they have to pay all their pensions they can't afford to pay. They're running out of the money. This is where the big problem's coming in this country. They have no money. They're running out of their pension money. It's happening in the police in them communities, the fire people.
Yeah.
You want to talk about problems, Trump, my buddy Trump, God bless his soul, you want to talk about where it's all going to happen. Here's where the belly's going to happen. The belly's going to happen because there's no money left. They left them no money to pay all those pensions. So that is the big problem. I mean, Trump doesn't have the money to make America great again. The problem with the pensions, of course, goes back to the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud, because when Wall Street was packaging these fraudulent mortgage bundles, Wall Street's rating agencies all rated them AAA, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. And so the pensions bought these bundles. My prediction.
The whole thing fell apart.
Here's my prediction. Trump made a picture with the boss. He says, listen, charter schools are working. Our education system ain't working. Here's what he's going to pull. Here's what he's going to do. He's going to say, no, here's what we're going to do. Charter schools are in. Public schools are out. We're going to start phasing this down, just like, with health care. We're going to make this happen because charter schools are producing people, and we're going to make this happen, and it's going to be less burden on our communities. He's going to be able to say to these senior citizens, you don't have to pay property taxes this high anymore. This is how it's going to happen.
Okay, there's a problem. There's a problem there. Okay, property taxes are not federal. Property taxes are state and local.
I didn't say federal. Local. No.
Obama doesn't. Hang on. Obama does not have the authority to say that people living in a city or county or state don't have to pay taxes. There are limits to what Trump can do.
No, I didn't say that, Michael.
Okay.
Michael, God bless you. I didn't say that. What I said is, pretend you're a senior citizen, living in a community, you have no children at all, period.
Yeah.
You don't have a kid. You don't have a kid going to school. So you no longer have to worry about that district because we made it into a charter community. And the charter community has their children going to school now. And the charter schools are producing. There's less kids going to school. Schools ain't packed like they used to be.
No, they aren't. I mean, if I'd been lucky enough to have a child, I would not let them in our current public school system, certainly not to eat those Obama school lunches. I would either homeschool or private school. And it really isn't out of,
all three of mine went. All three of my children went to private school, and they're doing fantastic. And I'm not saying all the public school kids are doing bad. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying that the money isn't going where it's supposed to go. It's never working. These people are eating it at the top and filtering it down to the bottom, and there's nothing there for them.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, around here, we'll see schools with tables in front of, like, the local supermarket accepting public donations for basic school supplies like paper and pens and stuff.
Why is that happening?
Yeah, it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. Frankly, I think all of our tax money should be going to the... Hey, can I make a comment, please? It is my radio show.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I think our tax money should be going to those children at the level of the children, and I think when the Pentagon wants a new fighter jet, they should have a bake sale in front of the supermarket.
God bless you, sir. I'm sorry for taking your time up. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we were talking about earthquakes up in Italy. Jalisco is bathed in ash after a powerful eruption of the Colima volcano in Mexico. They've declared a state of alert. And I actually just now got a message on my phone that there has been some kind of a tsunami warning here, so we're going to have to look in and see where that came from. The volcano up in the Aleutians, Bogoslav, is acting up again. It was down to a code orange. It's backed up to a red, and they're having to declare the airspace over it closed because you do not want to fly an aircraft through that plume of volcanic ash here. So let's talk a little bit about computers. The state of computer security is a joke. And part of it is that the U.S. government and the NSA have turned all of our electronics into spying machines on us, and the cyber criminals are finding all these backdoors and they're using them. Now, apparently Samsung, which is already dealing with a bunch of problems, has a security product called the Smart Cam. And this is one of those devices where you'll have these cameras all over your home, and it allows you to look at your home over the internet from a remote location. I have a friend who has a vacation house down in Maui. He's been dealing with some vandalism issues, so he installed one of these systems, and he can basically keep an eye on his vacation property on his smartphone here on the island of Oahu. The problem is that apparently Samsung's Smart Cam has a flaw that would allow hackers to break into these camera systems and watch you and your children and your family going about their home, doing whatever it is they do in their home. And apparently, along with turning on the cameras remotely, the security flaw would even allow the hackers to lock you out of your security system, meaning all of a sudden my friend can't see the house on Maui while it's being looted. Change the password details. It really is very much out of control. At this point at my age, I'm actually starting to turn into a Luddite. I got a bunch of computers around here. Don't let that fool you. I'm starting to say I really can live without all this stuff. I'm already starting to miss that old-fashioned telephone with the round thing on it. You would spin it around in a circle and you'd talk to people, and that's all it did. Because all of this high-technology whiz-bang is being used against us by the government, by the criminals. At what point do we say, it just isn't worth having this stuff around anymore? Do I really need a smartphone? No, actually I don't. Anyway, now there's a company called Data Miner, and it is a news-breaking service that automatically scans Twitter and gives breaking stories and headlines to news agencies. Apparently they've cut off access for Russia Today without giving any explanation whatsoever. Just saying, you cannot have this. It's not going to happen. Again, behaving like children. Facebook blocked Russia Today from posting until after the Trump inauguration. That went viral around the world, and Facebook relented and restored Russia Today's ability to post to their own Facebook channel. So, again, very childish. Now, speaking of Facebook, did you know Mark Zuckerberg doesn't actually use Facebook himself? He actually has about a dozen employees that run his Facebook page for him, updating his profile, feeding out stories about how great he is, responding to questions. He himself doesn't use it. Now, Zuckerberg is dealing with a couple of other issues. As you know, Facebook has been hit recently with several mistakes that result in overcharging advertisers. No mistakes that undercharge the advertisers, yet to be seen. More about Facebook when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about Mark Zuckerberg and various issues he's dealing with, like accidentally, we're sure, overcharging his advertisers. Apparently he's being accused of pirating somebody else's virtual reality technology. And here locally, there's kind of a bizarre legal battle going on here. As you know, Zuckerberg has this 700-acre property out on Kauai. But there is a complication, because there are a dozen small parcels on this land that belong to Hawaiian citizens who own that land through legislation going back to 1850 called the Kuleana Act. And because of that, these landowners, in order to get to their parcels, are allowed to walk through Zuckerberg's estate. But the report that we're getting from the Star Advertiser is that Zuckerberg is filing lawsuits against all of these people, a couple hundred of them, in the hope that if he can bankrupt them on legal fees, they'll be forced to sell their land to him and he'll have his privacy. As if 700 acres doesn't give you enough privacy. And there's a little bit of an irony there, that Zuckerberg wants his privacy, at the same time he's taking it away from all of his users. Let's take a phone call now. Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Zuckerberg says that we're dumb effers. So I guess we kind of are if after he says that we just keep giving all our private information to him. We definitely should flush him down the toilet with Hillary and move on over to the alternative. What was it again?
Scene Life, Gab, VK. There's a whole bunch of them springing up. I'm getting emails from a couple of other these startups. They want me to come on over there, and Angel List is one. I haven't signed up for them yet.
Yeah, I've already gone through the process starting to sign up to them, and the next thing is to figure out how to follow you on the alternative Twitter, Gab. But I never used the original Twitter, so I'm kind of feeling like Twitter illiterate here.
Yeah, I don't use Twitter.
I followed your link on your website, and it wasn't self-explanatory to me. I couldn't actually figure out how to follow you.
Well, they're still developing this stuff. A lot of it's in beta, and I don't use Twitter as much as I should. I do post some stuff there every once in a while, but I probably ought to be using Twitter a lot more, because that seems to become the focus of real-time online social media, so I really should be using it more, or Gab in its place. I used to tend my focus on Facebook. I have 2 accounts over there, one under my name, one under the website. And I'm starting to really focus on Scene Life. But I'm not doing Gab and Twitter probably as much as I ought to be.
Okay, excellent. Can I go through a few items here?
Yes, but I'm going to have to take you through the next commercial break.
Okay. So one of the most important things to cover about this pH balance in the system is a very interesting fact that the bloodstream is actually a buffered, closed system, meaning that if your food is too acidic, your bloodstream doesn't immediately go too acidic. It gets buffered. So minerals out of your bones are extracted to balance out that. And then if your bloodstream gets too alkaline, then through your lungs, acidity from something in the air is used to balance it out. So it's this very amazing, complicated design protected system, and it's just one more reason to be against the idea of vaccinations where you're just directly injecting into a buffered system. And
yeah,
so this is where
it's like
comes
this
from a lot. Is people get old because they've had too acid diets for decades, and their bones are getting extracted to buffer their blood.
Osteoporosis.
And that's where a lot of this weakness comes from in the bones.
Yeah, you're talking about osteoporosis, and the American diet especially is highly acidic, especially all that processed corporate packaged food. It's very, very acidic indeed. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Mateus, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after these few words. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phones here, apparently we just had a 6.8 earthquake near the Solomon Islands, and this is kind of interesting because there's been a lot of quake activity down there. Also, further along the same fault up by Papua New Guinea, and this is not the traditional pattern of a big quake followed by a bunch of decreasing aftershocks. This is another big shock. So I have a feeling that whole system is starting to move around a little bit uncomfortably. Anyway, Mateus, where did we leave off?
Things are starting to rock and roll over the world.
Yes.
The volcano activity and earthquakes.
Yep.
We're talking about pH, about the buffered system of the blood and how your bones get weak to sacrifice themselves to keep your bloodstream, which is even more important than your bones, at a proper pH level. Because you'll die faster with bad blood than you will with bad bones. And so this is where you get the common getting older and having brittle bones and breaking your hip and all that thing. So yeah, definitely, like you've been saying very wisely, encouraging people to research about the pH balance and how to do that.
Yes.
And then it kind of branched off into another reason not to mess with the bloodstream. It's such a protected system. It doesn't make any sense to just be putting like some modern scientific technology injected right in there. And I saw this documentary about the risks of being attacked by anthrax attack or terrorists.
Yes.
And they were saying it's actually really hard to do that because you'd have to dump so much of it in the air from an airplane that by the time it got down to the ground, it wouldn't really be effective. And the announcer said for it to be effective, you would have to like line everybody up and inject them with it. And it just made me think of vaccines. It always stuck in my head, that image.
Well, let me address that issue here because, anthrax was basically being used as a propaganda device to get us all scared that Osama bin Laden was going to attack us with anthrax. And remember, after 9/11, all these politicians and media people got sent these envelopes with anthrax in there, which turned out to actually come from a U.S. government bioweapons laboratory. But the reality is anthrax is a very effective battlefield weapon, but it's a poor weapon for terrorism because of the issue of secondary communicability. If you inhale the anthrax spores, you will get anthrax, but you can't give it to other people. And for an ideal biological terror weapon, you want something that has high secondary communicability, where you only infect a few people at a train station or a convention center, then they travel on out and they do the work of infecting the larger population for you. And that's why this story about anthrax is a terror. That's why this claim of anthrax as a terror weapon never really stood up.
Right. An even better evil weapon would be a race-specific weapon, which there does seem to be some strange, like the HIV virus does seem to be more devastating to certain gene pools than others. And there's also
Israel's been working on racially specific biological weapons for a lot of years.
This is just so evil. Like I just can't believe how bad some people are. Okay, so that brings me to an Israel point. Okay, my family friend who just died a few weeks ago was an Auschwitz survivor, and she was so grateful to the Russians for liberating her and for the army being well-behaved during the whole process that she made a point of learning how to speak Russian. And that was quite an effort because she didn't live in any Russian-speaking areas. Like she just literally took courses on that So for that reason, she's able to speak with my wife in Russian. So now consider that a lot of the U.S. foreign policy is being influenced behind the scenes by Israel government, and that the foreign policy is to hate Russia right now. Doesn't that seem a bit ungrateful? Like, Russia was liberators more than any other Americans or Canadians or anybody else. The Russians paid more in blood to end Hitler, and they went in there and liberated them. And then on top of that, the Americans were liberators also. And so, and the Israelis are saying that the Americans have to, like, make reparations to Israel forever. Like, what is going on? Like, they got it totally backwards.
Yeah, they do. It's almost like they know they don't really have anything to be grateful about. But yeah, that's always been Israel's attitude is, okay, you were nice to me before, what have you done recently? And you know, every time you talk about the sacrifices that the Allies made to stop Adolf Hitler, what you get back is, well, you didn't do it soon enough. You didn't do enough early enough, and that's why you owe us more money.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about Israel government. The people are often just as much victimized as any other country. Like right now, I feel victimized by the decisions that my government are making that are not in my best interest and without my permission.
Yes.
And so, it's, yeah, we're talking politics here, definitely. And I would like, please, to clarify what I was saying. Like, am I a racist? I was calling yesterday because I didn't like the idea of the person that's in charge of defense of Canada wearing a turban. I don't know why I was putting it like that. I know I'm not a racist, but what I didn't feel like I had time to explain it. But my concern is that if a person is not born in the country that they're in charge of, that puts the entire country in a geopolitical, strategic defense weakened position just
Absolutely.
Because of the laws of averages.
Well,
yeah, just because of the laws of averages, that it's a little bit more likely that there could be the chance of treason, for example.
There's no question. That's why the founding fathers put that natural-born citizenship requirement into the Constitution.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, I told my liberal brainwashed friend about this, and he was like shocked at like how. That's why I got the idea of my racist, because he was just so shocked at how racist that comment was. And I had to explain to him, like, look, you just have to think about history, and you'd have to just consider that if you're raised with a different set of cultural mythologies about your civilization, and you have different traditions and different religions. I know we're not supposed to be considering religion, but you know what? It's not a perfect world. The truth is that if you have very strong religious convictions, that does affect things. Like, we can't get around it. It's nice to try most of the time, but if we want to be honest with ourselves, if one religion says that it's okay to stone women to death for the crime of shaming their family because they were raped, you know what? It's not okay, even if that's just your religion. We're going to have to balance this out here.
Yeah, well, we do.
In charge of Canada that has a totally different set of.
Okay, no, and I'm going to have to let you go because we've got another caller who's been waiting very, very patiently. It's one thing to respect people's right to their own religion, but we do have a legitimate reason to enforce the civil laws against certain behaviors. And I know there's a lot of religious people who try and go to court and say it's okay for me to do this because God said it was all right, but the courts are going to come on back and say the Constitution does not allow us to include religion in our deliberations. And the fact that you beat your wife, that is a crime, and I don't care what your religion says about it, and you can scream religious discrimination all you want, but if you beat your wife, you're going to go to jail. Okay?
Michael, have a great day, and have a good weekend, and I look forward to the clarification hour.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to talk about that. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to James in Charlotte, North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. Happy Inauguration Eve. I hope we have a happy Inauguration Day.
Looks like it's going to be.
Yeah. One thing, we've, over the last 8 years, witnessed the wholesale abuse of the power of executive order. And I've heard that Donald Trump has got like a couple of hundred executive orders ready to go on his desk as soon as he finishes the inauguration ceremonies. And one thing I would like to see, and I think we need, is, and this may take some congressional action, is a definite clarification of what the power of the executive order should be and how it should be limited.
Well, we really should have that, but Donald Trump is coming into office riding on the precedent of executive orders as set by Barack Obama. And as long as Congress is under GOP control, I don't think the Democrats are going to be able to mount a challenge. But technically, an executive order by the president only applies to the executive branch and has no bearing on ordinary citizens or the other two branches of the government. Unfortunately, Obama set the precedent of literally being able to start wars and change immigration policy with executive orders, but Trump is certainly within his rights as president to simply say this previous executive order is now rescinded and null and void.
Right. I know that the Republicans are going to want to hang on to that power that has been so greatly expanded, but I think that it's going to be to the detriment of us all if it continues, and certainly if it increases even more.
I don't really see Trump abusing executive orders the way that Obama did. Again, you know, his three biggest problems are an economy that's on the verge of a collapse, and there's nothing you can do with an executive order that's going to fix that. He's dealing with an adversarial media, and it looks like Trump is going to slap them down hard, so that may not be the issue that we worried about. And he is dealing, even though Congress is controlled by the GOP, a lot of them are obstructionists, a lot of them are part of the Never Trump movement like John McCain, and a lot of them are still neocons and dream of a global war of conquest as long as they and their families don't personally have to serve in it.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is that the man has really got his work cut out for him.
He does, but he did want the job, and I'm glad he's there, and I worked very hard to help put him there. But, you know, I don't envy him the position. Basically, he's just been made captain of the Titanic after it's already slammed into the iceberg. And so he definitely,
yeah.
You know, and even if he gets that ship, even if he gets that ship to New York, the corporate media is going to say, wow, look at the dent in the bow of that thing there. Couldn't you be more careful?
Yeah, yeah. And on the maiden voyage, shame, shame, shame.
Yes. Anything else?
Well, no, that's it.
All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're coming up here on the end of the program. And still trying to get my voice to hold together here for a little bit. Now then, you probably heard recently that there is a strain of bird flu that has been documented as being transmitted to a human. And this is not entirely unknown. A lot of pathogens, while species-specific, will jump species. And apparently, not only has this bird flu transmitted to a human, apparently it's been discovered that hundreds of cats in New York City are carrying this exact same bird flu strain. So people are going to have to be very, very careful about what's going on. And whether these are stray cats or pets, it is an issue. Well, apparently these are cats that were found in animal shelters, confirmed as infected with avian flu H7N2. One of the areas of concern that emerged back in 2009 when they had the when pigs fly flu is that CDC plays with creating these things. And I was very alarmed where they were digging up frozen bodies of victims of the 1918 badly misnamed Spanish flu, because it didn't emerge in Spain, it emerged in the United States on a military base. And they were trying to bring that one back. And you have to ask, Why? Because everybody alive today is the descendant of people who survived that flu and presumably still have a natural immunity to it. But we do know there is a segment of the elites who think that ordinary people have served their purpose and made them very, very rich, and now they'd like us to go away. And they're running around saying the world is overpopulated because we're rich, we have the right to do something about it. Well, I understand there's a human population problem. And there always will be, because sex is a lot more fun than dying. But I have a real problem with anybody who gets up there and says they want to solve the population problem by telling other people they can't have babies or that they should go ahead and die. Such as Melinda Gates. If you are really convinced there is an overpopulation problem, find a very tall building and jump off. Try and hit a private central banker on your way to the ground. But I really do have a problem with these unelected, ultra-rich people playing God with the rest of us. And by the way, I'm not the first person to think along these lines. If you remember Tom Clancy's book, Rainbow Six, that was all about this group of very rich people who were going to wipe out 90% of the human race and let the world go back to nature, except for where their mansions and palaces were built. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Eric in Nebraska, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Anybody that wants to know how hard of a job Trump's got ahead of him, just take like 10 minutes tonight and watch Chapter 16 of Money Masters. That's the chapter that deals with Andrew Jackson and how much grief he went through to get rid of the second DUS.
Yes.
It involved, firing so many federal employees, going through multiple Secretary of Treasuries and all this stuff. And it's going to take a lot of work, and he's going to need a lot of help.
Yeah.
And it's not over.
No, and like I said, we the American people are going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with our President Donald Trump and help him get these changes made. He can't do it by himself. He's going to need our help, and if we want those changes, we're going to have to work to make it happen. All Donald Trump is a president who is on board with the changes we the American people want to see made in this country.
Absolutely. But the door's open for us to, walk through it. We've got to help him out a lot.
Absolutely. So, no question about that.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Aloha.
Aloha. We're going to let you go. Take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show. Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Not much, Mike. Is there any chance we'll wake up to a pardon from Obama for Clinton? What do you think?
Who knows? He could issue that pardon right up to the moment he walks out of that White House and heads for Palm Springs. Well, right up to the moment where Trump takes his oath of office. Obama is still the president. He could still do it. It will be a black stain on his legacy. And we will make sure that it is the blackest of black stains on his legacy. But who knows? I mean, no indication yet. But we'll see. The night is still young, as they say.
Now, unfortunately, if he does not pardon her, bringing her and her administration, or Obama's administration, participants of her crimes, is going to, that alone could be a whole term of a presidency. Unfortunately, I don't know. Maybe they're thinking, he wouldn't be able to accomplish anything other than that if Trump was going to prosecute her. What do you think?
Well, Trump isn't going to do it himself. He's basically going to tell the FBI and the Department of Justice, go after her and let them do their job. Trey Gowdy is certainly, now that he's on the Intelligence Committee, we know how Trey is. Trey is going to go after her. And Trump can just sit back and focus on being president and let the system do its job.
I hope you're right. I hope Trey Gowdy does do it, but I've heard from Judicial Watch that the Republicans today could have impeached Hillary Clinton for her crimes.
Yeah, they could have.
They're not doing it.
Well, remember, over the last 30-plus years, Bill and Hillary Clinton have been neck deep at the very core of the narcocracy corruption. They've got the dirt on everybody who took part, everybody who profited from helping the CIA with all this stuff. There was an anonymous FBI agent posting to the web saying that that Clinton Foundation was a giant money laundering and tax avoidance scheme, and that all of the top people in Washington, D.C., Republican and Democrat, are dirty with it. And, you know, the Clintons know where all the dead bodies are buried and how they got to be dead bodies. But now that she's not going to have the power of the White House behind her, we might actually see Congress grow some gonadal tissue on this matter.
I hope they do. If they don't, it's going to put out the wrong signal. To me, it's going to send a signal that we're never going to be able to change the deep corruption that's entrenched in our establishment. I mean, it's deep. I mean, it's the CIA, it's Wall Street, it's the bankers. Well,
if we let me finish because we're almost at the end of the show. If we don't pull back from this corruption, then the United States is going to collapse the way the Soviet Union did. Those are our two choices. There is no middle ground. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Thank you for the phone call, Alex. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, Inauguration Day, with clarification in hour number 3. So have a good evening, and aloha, America.